Marcus Kane's journey to becoming a self-made CEO was nothing short of extraordinary. Born and raised in the heart of inner-city Detroit, Marcus grew up surrounded by challenges that would have discouraged most people. His father worked long hours as a mechanic, while his mother juggled two jobs just to keep food on the table. Despite their struggles, they always emphasized the importance of education and hard work. From an early age, Marcus absorbed these lessons like a sponge, knowing deep down that he wanted something more for himself and his family. As a child, Marcus found solace in tinkering with old electronics. He'd often spend hours taking apart broken radios or outdated computers, trying to figure out how they worked. What started as a hobby soon turned into a passion. By high school, Marcus had taught himself basic coding and was building simple programs on his family's hand-me-down computer. While other kids were playing video games, Marcus was learning how to create them. His teachers noticed his talent and encouraged him to pursue a career in technology, even helping him secure a scholarship to a local university. College wasn't easy for Marcus. He commuted daily from home because he couldn't afford dorm fees, and he worked part-time at a fast food restaurant to cover his expenses. Balancing academics with work left little room for rest, but Marcus refused to give up. During his junior year, he joined a student-led tech club where he met like-minded individuals who shared his enthusiasm for innovation. Together, they brainstormed ideas and built small projects, one of which caught the attention of a local startup looking for fresh talent. That internship became Marcus's first step into the professional world of tech. After graduation, Marcus landed a job at a mid-sized software company. It was there that he discovered his knack for problem-solving and leadership. He quickly climbed the ranks, earning promotions and gaining valuable experience along the way. But despite his growing success, Marcus couldn't ignore the subtle biases he faced in the workplace. Colleagues often assumed he was less qualified than his peers, and supervisors sometimes overlooked his contributions during meetings. These experiences only fueled his determination to prove himself and break barriers. By the time Marcus turned 30, he had saved enough money to start his own business. Inspired by the struggles of small entrepreneurs he'd met over the years, he founded Canatech, a company focused on creating affordable data analytics tools for businesses with limited resources. The idea took off faster than anyone expected. Within 5 years, Canatech had grown into a multi-million-dollar enterprise, earning accolades for its cutting-edge solutions and diverse workforce. Marcus became a role model not just for aspiring entrepreneurs, but also for communities of color striving to make their mark in industries dominated by privilege. Despite his achievements, Marcus never forgot where he came from. He remained humble, often visiting schools in underserved neighborhoods to share his story and inspire young minds. He believed that success wasn't just about personal gain, it was about lifting others up and paving the way for future generations. Little did Marcus know, however, that one fateful day would test not only his patience, but also his resolve to challenge the systemic inequalities he'd fought so hard to overcome. The email from Venture Corp arrived on a Tuesday morning, and Marcus couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and apprehension. It was an invitation to meet with their top executives, a group known for spotting the next big thing in Silicon Valley and turning startups into global powerhouses. For Canatech, this could mean access to resources, connections, and funding that would take the company to unprecedented levels. But Marcus knew better than to get carried away. He had been in enough boardrooms to understand the delicate dance of negotiations and the unspoken rules of corporate politics. Preparation became his priority. Marcus spent days reviewing every detail about Venture Corp, their portfolio companies, recent investments, and even profiles of the key players he'd be meeting. He wanted to ensure he wasn't just another pitch. They needed to see him as a partner, not just another entrepreneur looking for handouts. His team worked tirelessly alongside him, refining presentations, running simulations, and preparing answers for potential questions. By the time Friday rolled around, Marcus felt confident. He knew his numbers inside out, his vision was clear, and his strategy was solid. On the morning of the meeting, Marcus woke up early, dressed impeccably in a navy blue suit tailored to perfection. He chose it deliberately. It was professional yet approachable, commanding without being overbearing. As he stood in front of the mirror tying his tie, he reminded himself why he was doing this. This wasn't just about growing Canatech. It was about proving that success isn't defined by background or appearance. It's about ideas, execution, and impact. With that thought firmly planted in his mind, he grabbed his briefcase and headed to the office building where the meeting was scheduled. The drive gave him time to reflect. Over the years, Marcus had learned to navigate spaces where people underestimated him because of his race. He had walked into rooms full of skeptics who assumed he didn't belong there. Yet each time, he let his work speak for itself, silencing doubts with results. Still, no matter how many victories he achieved, moments of prejudice lingered like shadows. They weren't always blatant. Sometimes, it was a dismissive glance, a condescending tone, or a comment laced with subtle bias. Marcus had grown accustomed to brushing these off, focusing instead on the bigger picture. But today, he hoped things would be different. After all, Venture Corp prided itself on diversity and inclusion, or so their glossy brochures claimed. When Marcus arrived at the sleek glass tower housing Venture Corp's headquarters, he parked his car and took a moment to observe the bustling activity around him. Young professionals hurried past, clutching coffees and tablets, while security guards nodded politely at visitors entering the lobby. The energy was palpable, a testament to the ambition coursing through the veins of the tech world. Taking a deep breath, Marcus stepped inside, ready to make his mark. He approached the reception desk, feeling a familiar flutter of nerves mixed with determination. This was it, the culmination of months of hard work and preparation. Little did he know, the first interaction he'd have with Venture Corp wouldn't be with its executives, but with someone who might change the course of the entire meeting before it even began. As Marcus approached the reception desk, he couldn't help but notice how polished everything looked. The lobby was a masterpiece of modern design, gleaming marble floors, abstract art on the walls, and a massive chandelier that seemed to float in midair. It screamed sophistication and power, the kind of place where deals worth millions were made every day. But none of that fazed Marcus. He had been in enough high-profile buildings to know that appearances didn't define substance. What mattered most was what happened behind closed doors. The receptionist sat behind a sleek counter, her attention glued to her phone as she scrolled absent-mindedly through social media. She barely glanced up when Marcus stopped in front of her. Her posture was relaxed, almost dismissive, as if she assumed anyone walking in at this hour wasn't particularly important. Without looking directly at him, she muttered, "Can I help you?" Her tone was clipped, automatic, like she'd said those words hundreds of times before without meaning them. Marcus cleared his throat gently to get her attention. When she finally lifted her eyes from her screen, they flickered over him quickly, from his neatly pressed suit to his polished shoes, and then back down again. There was no curiosity in her gaze, no effort to truly see him. Instead, there was something else, an assumption, unspoken but clear. To her, Marcus didn't fit the image of someone who belonged here. His dark skin, combined with her unconscious biases, led her to make a snap judgment. And just like that, she decided who he was, or rather, who she thought he was. "I'm here for the 10 a.m. meeting with Mr. Thompson," Marcus said calmly, his voice steady and professional. He handed her a card with his name printed on it, though he doubted she would take the time to read it. Sure enough, she barely glanced at it before waving him off. "You'll need to wait outside until someone comes to get you," she replied curtly, already turning her attention back to her phone. For a moment, Marcus stood frozen, the weight of her words sinking in. He had expected professionalism, perhaps even warmth, given the caliber of the company. But this casual disregard felt like a slap in the face. It wasn't just about being asked to wait. It was the way she said it, the certainty in her voice that he didn't belong. It reminded him of countless other moments throughout his life when people had underestimated him based on nothing more than the color of his skin. But Marcus didn't react immediately. Years of navigating corporate spaces had taught him the value of composure. Instead of arguing or demanding answers, he stepped back quietly, observing the scene around him. He noticed the security guard nearby, who gave him a polite nod, unaware of the exchange that had just taken place. He saw other employees bustling about, some heading to elevators, others chatting casually by the coffee station. Everything seemed normal routine. No one paid any attention to the man standing near the entrance, clutching a briefcase and wearing a suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent. As Marcus moved slightly away from the desk, he allowed himself a small, ironic smile. This wasn't the first time he faced such treatment, and it likely wouldn't be the last. But something about this particular incident struck a nerve deeper than usual. Maybe it was because he had worked so hard to prepare for this meeting, or maybe it was because he had hoped, perhaps naively, that a company like Venture Corp would rise above such petty prejudices. Whatever the reason, Marcus knew this moment would stay with him long after he left the building. He glanced at his watch. It was 9:57 a.m., 3 minutes until the meeting was supposed to start. As he stood there, waiting silently, Marcus began to wonder how this encounter might shape the rest of the day, and whether Venture Corp truly understood the kind of partner they were dealing with. Just as Marcus was processing the receptionist's dismissive behavior, the glass doors of the lobby swung open again. A man in his mid-40s walked in, dressed in a crisp gray suit that matched the polished atmosphere of the building. His leather shoes clicked against the marble floor with authority, and he carried an air of confidence that seemed to command attention. Unlike Marcus, this man didn't have to announce his presence. The receptionist immediately looked up from her phone, her demeanor shifting instantly. "Good morning, Mr. Reynolds," she said brightly, her tone warm and welcoming. She stood up slightly, leaning forward as if eager to assist him. "Mr. Thompson is expecting you. Please follow me. I'll take you to the conference room." Marcus watched silently as the receptionist led the man toward the elevators, chatting politely along the way. Her body language spoke volumes. She was attentive, respectful, and clearly treating him as someone important. The contrast between how she had treated Marcus and how she treated this newcomer couldn't have been starker. It wasn't just about the difference in their attire or mannerisms. It was about assumptions rooted in bias, assumptions that had nothing to do with competence or relevance. Standing there, Marcus felt a familiar ache in his chest, one he'd experienced many times before, but never fully gotten used to. He knew exactly what had happened here. The receptionist hadn't taken the time to see him for who he was. Instead, she had judged him based on preconceived notions. To her, Marcus didn't look like a CEO. He didn't fit the image she had in her mind of someone worthy of respect in this setting. And while Marcus understood that such biases were often unconscious, that knowledge didn't make the sting any less sharp. What made this moment particularly infuriating was its timing. This wasn't some random encounter at a coffee shop or a fleeting interaction on the street. This was Venture Corp, a company that prided itself on innovation, diversity, and inclusion, or so they claimed in their glossy marketing materials. Yet here they were, failing at the very first step of engagement. If this was how they treated potential partners before even knowing who they were, what did that say about their true values? As Marcus processed these thoughts, he noticed something else: the irony of the situation. Just moments earlier, he had been preparing himself mentally for a high-stakes meeting where he would pitch his vision, share his achievements, and prove why Canatech deserved their investment. But now, standing there watching the receptionist fawn over another man simply because he looked the part, Marcus realized he no longer needed to convince anyone of his worth. His track record spoke for itself: his success, his resilience, and his ability to build something extraordinary out of nothing. The truth hit him like a wave. Venture Corp didn't deserve his time. Not after this. They could tout themselves as champions of progress all they wanted, but actions spoke louder than words. And right now, their actions reveal a deep flaw, not just in this one employee, but in the culture that allowed such behavior to go unchecked. Still, Marcus didn't let his emotions show. Instead, he continued observing quietly, taking note of every detail. He saw the way the security guard nodded approvingly as Mr. Reynolds passed by, the way other employees greeted him with smiles and handshakes. It was a performance, one that reinforced hierarchies and stereotypes without anyone even realizing it. For Marcus, it was both maddening and enlightening, a reminder of how far society still had to go in addressing systemic inequality. By the time the elevator doors closed behind Mr. Reynolds, Marcus had already made up his mind. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about sending a message, a statement that prejudice, whether intentional or not, came with consequences. As he stood there, his resolve hardened. Whatever happened next, Marcus Kane would ensure that Venture Corp wouldn't soon forget this day. The fallout from Marcus's decision began almost immediately. Within hours of his departure from Venture Corp, the story started to spread like wildfire. Sarah, his assistant, had followed through on his instructions with precision. She drafted a concise yet impactful press release, highlighting the incident without naming names or resorting to accusations. The statement read, "At Canatech, we believe in mutual respect and professionalism as the foundation of any partnership. Unfortunately, during a recent meeting with a potential investor, we encountered behavior that was inconsistent with these values. As a result, we have decided to terminate discussions and redirect our focus toward partners who share our commitment to equity and inclusion." It was subtle enough to avoid legal repercussions, but direct enough to spark curiosity. And curiosity quickly turned into action. By mid-afternoon, tech blogs and social media platforms were buzzing with speculation. Journalists began reaching out to Canatech for comments, while industry insiders tried piecing together what had happened. Meanwhile, Marcus posted a brief account of the incident on LinkedIn, not to shame anyone, but to shed light on an issue he knew all too well. His post was simple yet powerful. "Today, I showed up to a meeting ready to present my company's vision. Instead, I was told to wait outside because someone assumed I didn't belong. This isn't about me. It's about the countless others who face similar treatment every day. Respect costs nothing, but its absence can cost everything." The response was overwhelming. Within minutes, the post went viral, racking up thousands of likes, shares, and comments. Supporters flooded the thread, praising Marcus for taking a stand against bias. Many shared their own stories of being underestimated or dismissed due to race, gender, or background. Some even tagged colleagues and friends, urging them to reflect on their own actions and assumptions. On the flip side, there were critics. A small but vocal group accused Marcus of overreacting, suggesting that walking away from a major deal over one receptionist's mistake was excessive. It was just a misunderstanding. One commenter wrote, "Why throw away millions over something so minor?" Others argued that Marcus should have given Venture Corp a chance to explain themselves before pulling out entirely. But Marcus didn't engage with the negativity. He knew that not everyone would understand his perspective, and that was okay. What mattered most was staying true to his principles. Meanwhile, chaos erupted at Venture Corp. News of the incident traveled fast within the company, thanks to employees who had witnessed parts of the scene in the lobby. When word reached upper management, panic set in. Executives scrambled to assess the damage, holding emergency meetings to discuss how they could salvage their reputation. They issued a public apology later that evening, calling the incident unacceptable and promising to implement new training programs focused on diversity and inclusion. But it was clear their response was reactive rather than genuine, an attempt to mitigate bad press rather than address systemic issues. For Marcus, watching the fallout unfold was both satisfying and sobering. On one hand, he felt vindicated knowing that his actions had forced Venture Corp to confront its flaws. On the other hand, he couldn't help but think about the bigger picture. This wasn't just about one company or one receptionist. It was about a culture that allowed such biases to persist unchecked. Walking away from Venture Corp was a symbolic act, but symbols alone weren't enough to create lasting change. That evening, as Marcus sat in his home office reflecting on the day's events, his phone buzzed nonstop with messages from friends, mentors, and even strangers offering support. One message stood out, a text from his mother, who had seen the news online. It simply said, "I'm proud of you, son. Keep fighting for what's right." Reading those words brought tears to his eyes. For all the challenges he'd faced growing up, his parents had always taught him to stand tall and speak up when something wasn't fair. Today, he had done exactly that. And in doing so, he had ignited a conversation that extended far beyond himself. Marcus knew this was only the beginning. Shutting down negotiations with Venture Corp wasn't just about rejecting a bad partner. It was about paving the way for better ones. And as he closed his laptop for the night, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but Marcus Kane was ready to lead, not just his company, but an entire movement toward fairness and respect. The days following Marcus's bold decision turned into a whirlwind of media attention, public discourse, and introspection across industries. His LinkedIn post had struck a nerve, sparking conversations not just about Venture Corp, but about systemic bias in corporate America as a whole. Major news outlets picked up the story, framing it as a turning point in how businesses approach diversity and inclusion. Headlines like "CEO walks away from millions over racial bias," and "What Venture Corp got wrong," and "How it could have been different" dominated headlines for weeks. For Marcus, the spotlight was both empowering and exhausting. He found himself invited to speak on panels, podcasts, and even late-night talk shows, where hosts praised him for taking a stand. But Marcus wasn't interested in becoming a celebrity or basking in his newfound fame. Instead, he used these platforms to amplify the voices of others who had faced similar experiences. On one popular podcast, he shared stories sent to him by people around the world. Stories of being overlooked, underestimated, or outright dismissed because of their race, gender, or socioeconomic background. These aren't isolated incidents, Marcus explained during the interview. They're symptoms of a much larger problem. The question isn't whether this happens, it's why we allow it to keep happening. His words resonated deeply, inspiring countless individuals to share their own stories online using hashtags like #RespectMatters and #SeeMe4YM. What started as a single act of defiance had grown into a global movement, shining a light on the everyday microaggressions that many endured silently. For Marcus, seeing this collective outpouring of courage gave him hope, but also reinforced the urgency of addressing these issues head-on. Behind the scenes, however, Venture Corp continued to struggle with the fallout. Their initial apology had been met with skepticism, and efforts to repair their image only seemed to dig them deeper into controversy. Employees began speaking out anonymously, revealing a toxic culture of elitism and exclusion within the company. One former staffer described how junior employees of color were often mistaken for interns or support staff, no matter how senior their roles. Another recounted being excluded from key meetings despite their qualifications. These revelations painted a damning picture of an organization that talked a good game about diversity, but failed to live up to its promises. As the criticism mounted, several high-profile partners distanced themselves from Venture Corp. Startups reconsidered accepting their funding offers, while established companies severed ties altogether. Investors grew wary, questioning whether associating with Venture Corp might tarnish their own reputations. The once mighty firm found itself teetering on the brink of irrelevance, a stark reminder of how quickly trust could erode when values weren't backed by action. Amidst the chaos, Marcus remained focused on what mattered most: driving meaningful change. He announced the launch of a nonprofit initiative called Equity Forward, dedicated to mentoring underrepresented entrepreneurs and advocating for workplace equality. Through workshops, scholarships, and networking events, Equity Forward aimed to level the playing field for those who had historically been shut out of opportunities in tech and beyond. Marcus personally funded the project, pledging a significant portion of his own wealth to ensure its success. The response was overwhelming. Thousands applied for mentorship programs, and dozens of corporations reached out to partner with Equity Forward, eager to align themselves with its mission. Even some former critics of Marcus's decision came forward to express admiration for his vision and commitment to progress. One tech executive admitted in an open letter that Marcus's actions had forced him to reevaluate his own biases and make changes within his own company. By the end of the month, it was clear that Marcus's choice to walk away from Venture Corp had ripple effects far beyond what anyone could have anticipated. While Venture Corp worked desperately to rebuild its shattered reputation, Marcus Kane emerged as a symbol of resilience and integrity. He proved that standing up against injustice wasn't just morally right. It was also a catalyst for transformation. And though the journey ahead would undoubtedly be challenging, Marcus knew he wasn't alone. Thousands stood beside him, ready to build a future where respect and opportunity were truly universal. In the months that followed, Marcus Kane's life transformed in ways he hadn't fully anticipated. Walking away from Venture Corp had been a bold move, but it opened doors he never imagined possible. The nonprofit initiative, Equity Forward, quickly became a beacon of hope for underrepresented entrepreneurs across the country. Applications poured in from aspiring innovators, Black founders, women coders, immigrant dreamers, all eager to break into an industry that had long seemed out of reach. Marcus threw himself into mentoring these individuals, hosting workshops, and connecting them with resources they desperately needed. Watching their progress filled him with a sense of fulfillment that no business deal ever could. Canatech, meanwhile, thrived without Venture Corp. Investors who shared Marcus's vision stepped forward, eager to support a company led by someone willing to challenge the status quo. These new partners weren't just looking for financial returns, they wanted to be part of something bigger. Under Marcus's leadership, Canatech expanded its focus, launching products specifically designed to help small businesses owned by marginalized groups compete in the digital age. Revenue soared, and the company earned accolades not just for its technology, but for its commitment to social impact. The public reaction to Marcus's actions continued to evolve as well. While some critics still argued that walking away from Venture Corp was impulsive or overly dramatic, the majority opinion shifted firmly in his favor. People admired his courage and authenticity, seeing him as a leader unafraid to prioritize values over profit. His LinkedIn post remained one of the platform's most liked updates of the year, often cited as a turning point in conversations about workplace bias. Schools began teaching case studies on Marcus's decision, using it as an example of ethical leadership in action. For Venture Corp, the aftermath was far less forgiving. Despite their attempts to implement diversity training programs and rebrand themselves as champions of inclusion, the damage was done. Their reputation suffered irreparably, and many talented employees left the company, disillusioned by its lack of genuine change. Within a year, Venture Corp saw a sharp decline in both revenue and influence, eventually downsizing significantly. It served as a cautionary tale for other companies. Failing to live up to your stated values can have consequences far greater than any single lost deal. But for Marcus, the real victory wasn't about punishing Venture Corp. It was about creating opportunities for others. He traveled extensively, speaking at conferences and universities, sharing his story not to glorify himself, but to inspire action. Success isn't measured by how much money you make, he often said during these talks. It's measured by how many people you lift up along the way. His words resonated deeply, especially among young audiences who saw him as proof that barriers could be broken with determination and integrity. One particularly memorable moment came when Marcus returned to his childhood neighborhood in Detroit. Standing before a packed auditorium of students at his old high school, he announced a partnership between Equity Forward and local schools to provide coding classes and tech internships. As he looked out at the sea of hopeful faces, Marcus felt a lump form in his throat. These were kids who reminded him of himself, kids with big dreams and even bigger obstacles. Knowing he could play a role in helping them overcome those challenges made every sacrifice worthwhile. By the end of the year, Marcus reflected on how much had changed since that fateful morning at Venture Corp. What started as a personal affront had grown into a movement that transcended industries and inspired countless lives. He knew there was still work to be done. The fight against systemic bias wouldn't end overnight. But he also knew that progress was possible. By standing firm in his principles, Marcus had shown the world that shutting a door wasn't always an act of anger. It could also be an invitation to build something better. As he sat in his office late one evening, watching the city lights twinkle beyond the window, Marcus allowed himself a rare moment of pride. He had faced prejudice, navigated doubt, and risen above adversity time and again. But now, more than ever, he understood that success wasn't just about what you achieved for yourself. It was about leaving the ladder down for others to climb. And for Marcus Kane, that was the greatest legacy of all.